Have you ever wondered how a UFC fight can officially end? Most people think there are only two ways, a knockout or a submission. But under the unified rules of mixed martial arts, there are several official ways a fight can end. Some are common, while others are incredibly rare. Let's break down every official result, one by one. A knockout, or KO, is the most spectacular way to win a fight. A knockout happens when a legal strike causes a fighter to lose consciousness or leaves them completely unable to continue. As soon as the referee sees that the fighter cannot intelligently defend themselves, the fight is over immediately. Unlike boxing, there is no standing 10 count. Once you're unconscious, the contest ends instantly. One of the greatest examples is Conor McGregor vs. Jose Aldo at UFC 194. Just 13 seconds into the fight, McGregor landed a perfectly timed left hand that knocked Aldo unconscious, becoming the UFC featherweight champion and recording the fastest knockout in UFC title fight history. A technical knockout, or TKO, is different from a knockout because the fighter does not have to lose consciousness. Instead, the fight is stopped because the referee believes the fighter can no longer intelligently defend themselves, the cageside doctor determines it is unsafe to continue, or the fighter's corner decides to stop the fight to protect them. A recent example is Ilia Topuria vs. Justin Gaethje. Topuria overwhelmed Gaethje with powerful strikes, and once it became clear that Gaethje could no longer safely defend himself, the referee stepped in and stopped the contest, awarding Topuria the victory by TKO. A submission happens when a fighter forces their opponent to surrender using a choke or a joint lock. To avoid going unconscious or suffering a serious injury, the trapped fighter usually taps the mat, taps their opponent, or verbally submits. A perfect example is Islam Makhachev vs. Charles Oliveira at UFC 280. Islam locked in a tight arm triangle choke, leaving Oliveira with no escape and forcing him to tap out. A technical submission is slightly different. Here, the fighter never taps because they either become unconscious from a choke or are physically unable to tap while trapped in a submission hold. The referee recognizes the danger and stops the fight to protect the fighter. One of the most famous examples is Khabib Nurmagomedov vs. Justin Gaethje at UFC 254. Khabib secured a triangle choke, and Gaethje lost consciousness before he could tap, resulting in a technical submission. If neither fighter finishes the contest before the final bell, the fight goes to the judges' scorecards. A unanimous decision means all three judges agree on the winner, with every judge scoring the fight for the same fighter. A clear example is Israel Adesanya vs. Jared Cannonier at UFC 276, where all three judges awarded the fight to Adesanya. A split decision happens when two judges score the fight for one fighter while the third judge scores it for the other. These are often the closest and most controversial fights. A famous example is Alexander Volkanovski vs. Max Holloway II at UFC 251, where Volkanovski won by split decision. A majority decision occurs when two judges score the fight for one fighter, while the third judge scores the fight as a draw. Since two judges still pick the same winner, that fighter wins by majority decision. A well-known example is Frankie Edgar vs. Gray Maynard III. Sometimes, the judges cannot determine a winner. In that case, the fight ends in a draw. Draws can be unanimous, split, or majority depending on the judges' scorecards. A famous example is Frankie Edgar vs. Gray Maynard II, which ended in a majority draw after 5 rounds. A disqualification, or DQ, happens when a fighter commits a serious illegal foul or repeatedly breaks the rules after warnings. If the foul leaves the opponent unable to continue, the offending fighter is disqualified and their opponent is declared the winner. The most famous example is Petr Yan vs. Aljamain Sterling at UFC 259, when Yan landed an illegal knee to the head of a grounded Sterling. The final official result is a no contest. A no contest means the fight ends without a winner or loser because circumstances make it impossible or unfair to declare a result. This can happen after an accidental foul early in the fight or when a completed fight is later overturned. One of the most famous examples is John Jones vs. Daniel Cormier II at UFC 214. Although Jones originally won by knockout, the result was later changed to a no contest after he failed a drug test. These are every official way a UFC fight can end under the unified rules of mixed martial arts. This is MMA. One cage. Endless styles, only the best survive.